All right, so November 2nd, 2024. Eli Lilly, their business model. What's working? What are the challenges? What does the future look like?
Yeah, I think this earnings call really gives us some insight into that, especially with how much interest there is in their weight loss and diabetes drugs.
And we're taking a deep dive into this Q3 earnings call. It's hot off the press. So for anyone out there who thinks earnings calls are a snooze fest, think again.
Yeah, we're going to break down the jargon.
You're going to get to the good stuff.
Yeah, get to all the good stuff. So first off, revenue is way up. 42% increase this quarter.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's excluding the sale of their olanzapine portfolio.
That's a huge jump. What's fueling that growth?
I think the big story here is the new products. Mounjaro, Zepbound.
Yeah.
Over $3 billion in revenue this quarter.
Wow. Blockbuster drugs indeed. Of course, the demand is there. I imagine supply is the challenge.
Absolutely. That was a big topic that analysts were really kind of pressing on. How are they managing this this dance between supply and demand, especially given that they had, the backorder issues earlier this year at wholesale?
So how are they managing this? Are they holding back on the marketing? What's the plan?
Yeah, so they're taking a very calculated approach. They were able to clear the backorders that they had in Q2, so that created a temporary spike in sales.
Right.
And then coming into Q3, the wholesalers who had been stocking up started to adjust their inventory levels.
I see.
So you saw kind of a slight dip in sales for both Mounjaro and Zepbound this quarter.
So it sounds like it's a timing issue more than an actual decrease in demand.
Exactly, yeah. And they made that very clear that it was this inventory adjustment that's affecting Q3 sales.
Right.
But they're planning to actually increase their marketing spend starting mid-November.
Really?
Yeah.
Even with the supply constraints?
Right. They are. Yeah, but they're confident that they're going to be able to continue to ramp up production.
I see.
And, they're betting that they're going to be able to exceed their production goals for incretin medicines by at least 50% in the second half of this year compared to last year.
So they're saying build it and they will come?
Pretty much.
Okay.
And they expect to see that impact from the marketing starting to hit in Q2 of 2025. Now, one of the things that came up was the impact of compounding on demand.
Compounding, like the custom-made medication?
Yeah.
Okay.
So analysts were curious if Lilly saw that as a financial threat.
Or are they worried?
Interestingly, they said they weren't too concerned about the financial side of things, but they were very concerned about patient safety.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So they see that, unregulated compounding as a real risk, which really highlights their emphasis on working within, the FDA regulations.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of the FDA must play a huge role in all this, especially when it comes to, production capacity.
Absolutely. Yeah, they really emphasize their close collaboration with the FDA, particularly for getting approval to increase production. But it is a slow process, and I think it highlights that tension between the urgent need for these medications and the need for, the cautionary approach with the FDA.
Absolutely. Can't rush these things.
Yeah.
So, okay, massive demand for Mounjaro and Zepbound. Trying to navigate, these supply challenges and keep the FDA happy. What else are they doing to kind of solidify their position?
Well, one thing that's interesting is this Lilly Direct, their direct-to-consumer platform.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Isn't that geared toward patients who are having trouble getting these covered by insurance?
Exactly, yeah. So they recently launched a single-dose vial option that's available exclusively through Lilly Direct, and it's specifically for patients who are self-paying.
Yeah, and it's significantly cheaper than other similar medications, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty attractive offer for patients who are struggling to afford these treatments. Could be a real game changer in terms of reaching a wider patient population.
Yeah, they're really tackling that access issue head on.
Hmm?
Okay, but what about the competition? Because other companies are coming out with their own weight loss drugs. How is Lilly responding to that?
Yeah, that's where their pipeline comes in. They're not resting on their laurels with just Mounjaro and Zepbound.
Okay, let's hear it. What's in the pipeline?
Well, one that's generating a lot of buzz is orforglipron.
Oh.
It's their oral GLP-1 drug for weight loss.
Oral, so no more injections.
That's the idea. So if it proves to be successful in trials, it could really expand the market by overcoming, one of the biggest barriers for a lot of people, which is, the needles.
Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I can see why analysts are, glued to this one. This could be a major disruptor.
Absolutely. And it fits in perfectly with their strategy. They're offering both injectable and oral options,
Right.
Catering to a wider range of needs and preferences and potentially cornering the market.
So they've got you covered no matter your preference. But all this growth, all this expansion, it's got to be putting a strain on their operating margins.
That's the big question, yeah. And analysts were really pressing on that. Are you worried about profitability taking a hit?
What'd they say?
Well, they weren't sweating too much. So they have a unique way of calculating their operating margins. It's the ratio of gross margin minus operating expenses divided by revenue.
Okay.
It's a little bit nuanced, but the takeaway is that they expect to see some margin expansion in the short term.
Okay.
Good news for investors.
Yeah.
But they did acknowledge that, as they continue to scale up their R&D, as well as, marketing, those margins might level out over the long haul.
Right. So balancing, this push for aggressive growth with also making sure that they're staying profitable.
Exactly. Yeah. Finding that sweet spot.
Yeah. Like walking a tightrope. Okay, so before we get too lost in the weeds of all this, let's not forget that Lilly's not a one-trick pony. They have a lot going on beyond just weight loss and diabetes.
Oh, yeah. They have a whole pipeline of potential blockbusters in other areas like oncology, immunology, and even neuroscience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I almost forgot about those. I'm dying to hear what they're cooking up in those fields.
Yeah, so let's dive into that next. They've got some really promising therapies in development that could be a big deal for patients.
Okay, lead the way. Let's unpack these exciting developments.
So let's start with their work in neuroscience, specifically in Alzheimer's research. Their drug, donanemab, is making waves with some positive results from a phase 3 trial.
Yeah, this was the one that they presented at that big Alzheimer's conference,
Yeah.
right? So what made this trial so promising?
Well, they were testing a modified dosing schedule, so basically spacing out those initial doses to see if it could reduce the risk of ARIE. That's brain swelling, a pretty serious side effect.
Yeah, brain swelling. Not a good time.
No, not at all. And the results were really encouraging. This modified dosing regimen achieved similar levels of amyloid plaque reduction, which is what you want to see in Alzheimer's treatment, while significantly lowering those instances of ARIE.
So fewer side effects and similar effectiveness. That's great. What's next for donanemab?
So they're planning to submit a supplemental application to the FDA in the coming weeks based on these findings.
Okay.
And if approved, it could really make donanemab a much more viable treatment option for a wider range of patients.
Fingers crossed for that. It's incredible to see the strides being made in Alzheimer's research. It's such a heartbreaking disease, so any progress is a huge win.
Absolutely. And they're not stopping there. They're also exploring other potential Alzheimer's therapies, like remternetug, which targets tau. That's another protein that plays a role in the disease.
Well, interesting. So they're attacking Alzheimer's from multiple angles.
Exactly. And get this, they're about to start a phase 3 trial for remternetug, but this time they're focusing on the preclinical stage of Alzheimer's.
Preclinical, you mean before symptoms even show up?
Precisely, yeah. So if it works, it could completely change how we think about Alzheimer's prevention and treatment.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so serious moves in Alzheimer's. What about other areas of neuroscience?
Well, they've initiated a phase 2 study for an epiregulin antibody for chronic neuropathic pain.
Okay, back up. What exactly is chronic neuropathic pain?
So think of it as pain that stems from damage to the nervous system. It can be caused by things like diabetes, shingles, or even as a side effect of cancer treatments.
So this therapy could potentially bring relief to people suffering from chronic pain.
That's the hope. And they're also doing some early stage research on new neurodegeneration treatments, including these really interesting things called SerenA therapies.
Oh, I've heard of those. They're like these tiny little assassins that can shut down specific genes, right?
You got it. So that makes them a very targeted approach for treating diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, where you often see a buildup of harmful proteins.
It's like sending in this microscopic cleanup crew to take out the trash.
Exactly, yeah. And it has the potential to be really effective.
Okay. So neuroscience is a big focus for Lilly. What about their progress in oncology? Are they making any headway there?
Oh, yeah, big time. One of their most promising developments is an oral SRRD called imlunestrant, which showed some really positive results in a phase 3 trial for breast cancer.
Now remind me, SCR stands for?
Selective estrogen receptor degrader. Basically, these drugs block the effects of estrogen, which can fuel the growth of certain types of breast cancer.
Right, okay. And what makes this particular SCR so noteworthy?
Well, for starters, it's an oral medication, which is way more convenient for patients than intravenous therapies.
Yeah, that's a huge plus. especially if you're in it for the long haul.
Exactly. And the trial data showed that imlunestrant, both alone and in combination with another drug, was effective in treating a specific type of breast cancer, ER-positive, HER2 negative metastatic breast cancer.
So a very specific subtype of breast cancer they're targeting.
Exactly. And based on these positive results, they're aiming to submit an application to the FDA for approval by the end of the year.
That's fantastic news. It gives a lot of hope to women who are battling this type of cancer.
It really does, yeah. And it speaks volumes about Lilly's dedication to finding innovative cancer treatments.
You mentioned another potential game changer in oncology, olomorasib, was it?
Yeah, olomorasib, that's a really exciting one. So this drug targets a specific mutation, KRAS G12C. It's commonly found in lung cancer, among other cancers.
Okay. So how does this drug work?
It's designed to inhibit the activity of the mutated KRAS protein, so essentially cutting off its fuel supply and preventing tumor growth.
Another very targeted approach.
Exactly. And what's really cool is they've already figured out the optimal dose for this drug in combination with standard treatments under the FDA's Project Optimus.
Project Optimus. Tell me more.
So it's basically an FDA initiative that's trying to fast-track the development of cancer drugs by getting companies to figure out the best dose earlier in the clinical trial process.
So getting effective treatments to patients faster.
Right, exactly. And for olomorasib, that means that the phase 3 part of their first-line lung cancer study is already up and running.
That's awesome. Sounds like they're well on their way to bringing a new treatment option to people with lung cancer.
They are. And beyond olomorasib, they're exploring a whole bunch of other innovative approaches in oncology, like their oral SMARCA2 or BRM inhibitor, their KRAS G12D inhibitor, and their pan-KRAS inhibitor.
Wow, that's a lot of inhibitors. They're really covering their bases when it comes to these KRAS mutations.
They are. And, these are just a few examples. They actually moved 7 new oncology molecules into phase 1 studies this year, which is more than they initially planned.
Wow, so it sounds like 2025 is going to be a big year for Lilly in the oncology space with all these trials progressing.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be huge.
Yeah.
But their innovation isn't limited to just oncology. They're making some significant advances in immunology as well, with some new developments for conditions like eczema and ulcerative colitis.
Now, eczema, that's a skin condition, right? What does that have to do with immunology?
So it's actually an inflammatory skin condition, which means it's caused by an overactive immune system. And Lilly just got FDA approval for their drug, lebrikizumab, it's also known as Ebglyss, for moderate to severe atopic dermatitis. That's a common type of eczema.
So they've got a new treatment option for a condition that affects a lot of people.
Exactly. And what's really exciting about Ebglyss is that it targets a specific pathway in the immune system that's involved in inflammation. So it has the potential to provide long-term relief.
Do they have any data to support that?
Yeah, they shared some long-term data showing that Ebglyss provides sustained disease control for up to 3 years in over 80% of patients who responded to the treatment at 16 RITs. And they're actually looking at its potential for other inflammatory conditions like allergies and chronic sinus problems with nasal polyps.
So getting a lot of mileage out of that drug.
Absolutely. They're also exploring some innovative ways to combine existing therapies, like pairing ixekizumab, their current psoriasis drug, with tirzepatide.
Interesting. Why combine a psoriasis drug with a weight loss medication?
Well, research has shown that obesity can actually increase the risk of developing autoimmune diseases like psoriasis and make them harder to treat. So the thinking is, if you can address the obesity with tirzepatide, you can potentially improve the outcomes for people with psoriasis.
So it's a holistic approach, tackling multiple aspects of a patient's health.
Exactly. And it kind of speaks to their bigger picture strategy of developing these integrated solutions for complex medical challenges.
It's really pushing the boundaries of medical innovation.
It really is.
Yeah.
And they're also not afraid to pull the plug on trials if a drug isn't meeting their safety and effectiveness standards, like they did with parasolimab for rheumatoid arthritis. So, it just shows that they're really prioritizing patient safety and really focusing on the therapies that have the most potential. What's really impressive to me is they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. I mean, yeah, they have these weight loss drugs, but they're also really invested in these other areas.
Couldn't agree more.
Right.
It's a smart and diversified strategy. It reduces their reliance on any single product and really positions them for long-term growth across, multiple therapeutic fields.
And it shows that they're genuinely dedicated to, improving patient care beyond just like the hottest market. They're taking on some serious medical challenges.
Exactly. Yeah, and that really resonated with me throughout this call. They're not just chasing profits, they're genuinely invested in advancing, medical science and making a difference.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I think it's what really makes Lilly stand out.
Yeah, I agree. They're not just a pharmaceutical company. They're a force for positive change in the healthcare landscape. Well said. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here, from revenue and blockbuster drugs to their progress in neuroscience, oncology, and immunology. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to talk about, their emphasis on manufacturing.
Ah, yes, that's a crucial part of their business model, especially given the demand that they're facing.
Well, they mentioned that they're investing nearly $2 billion to expand their manufacturing facilities in Ireland, which brings their total investment in building, upgrading, and acquiring facilities since 2020 to over $20 billion.
Wow. That's a massive investment, and it really underscores their commitment to meeting this growing global demand.
Yeah, and that's not all. They also announced this separate $4.5 billion investment to create this thing called the Lilly Medicine Foundry.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one. Tell me more.
It's basically a first-of-its-kind facility that's going to be dedicated to research and development for manufacturing process design and for developing those high-quality investigational medications for their clinical trials.
So it's like a factory for innovation. Yeah. Within their manufacturing process.
Exactly. And they're building it right here in the U.S., in Indiana.
Indiana? Why Indiana?
Well, it's close to their corporate headquarters.
Yeah.
Which makes, collaboration between their research and manufacturing teams easier. And it highlights their commitment to investing in, American jobs and infrastructure.
It's a strategic move that benefits their business and the local economy.
Exactly. And I think it speaks to their long-term vision. They're not just trying to meet today's demand, they're building for the future.
That's what really impresses me about Lilly. They're playing the long game, making bold move, investing heavily, constantly innovating. They're not content with just being another pharmaceutical company.
They want to be leaders, shaping the future of healthcare.
And from what we've seen in this earnings call, they're well on their way.
We've covered so much ground today, but I know there's still more to explore about Eli Lilly's business.
Absolutely, and I encourage you to check out the full earnings call transcript or delve into some of those analyst reports we've mentioned if you want to really dive deep.
This has been an incredibly enlightening deep dive. I feel like I have a much clearer understanding of Eli Lilly as a company and their strategy.
Me too. And what's most exciting is that they're just getting started. They have this pipeline brimming with potential game changers, and they're clearly not afraid to, push the limits of innovation.
Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of Eli Lilly.
It's been a pleasure exploring these fascinating topics with you.
Until next time, keep those brains curious, and remember, knowledge is power.